I covered a Cynthia Nixon event. When was that? I think over the week. Yeah, Saturday. So you can go check out some of that coverage on YouTube, this channel. I also asked Cynthia a few questions, not a formal interview, but there were other reporters asking her questions, so I kind of jumped in. She's definitely down in the majority of the polls. I think the polls are probably definitely overestimating Cuomo's margin of victory. I also think that most of these polls are still calling landlines, and they're not. I don't know many millennials that use landline phones. So I do think the polling is probably out of step with what the actual results will be. I'm not going to say whether she's going to win or whether she's going to lose. I don't know. As of right now, it doesn't look great. But most people thought Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was going to get crushed, including me, to be honest. And then she won. So it's definitely, I think, going to be a lot closer than people think. But Cuomo, if you live in New York, all you hear on TV, all you hear on radio is Cuomo ads, Cuomo ads, Cuomo ads, calling him progressive, which he's not. I mean, Andrew Cuomo has deregulated. He's given banks whatever the hell they wanted. He's given fossil fuel companies a lot of what they wanted. He has given huge tax breaks to corporations and donors. He has governed like a Republican. I mean, that's just the truth. But a really, really cynical, shameful mailer was sent out. Oh, yes, and Cuomo has outspent her an insane amount. I think he spent $36 million on this campaign. On this re-election, Cynthia Nixon, I can tell you, has not spent anywhere near that because she hasn't raised anywhere near that. But the Democratic Party of New York sent out a mailer essentially to try and get Orthodox Jewish people and Jewish people to vote for Cuomo, suggesting that Cynthia Nixon is somehow anti-Semitic. They suggested that she supports the BDS movement, which is the boycott, divest, sanctions movement of Israel, even though Cynthia Nixon has never even talked about it. I don't know what she believes, but she's never publicly gave a position on BDS. And they talked about, they put some other positions on her to try and basically make her look like she's anti-Semitic, which besides politics is just shameful. And why this is important is because we see these kinds of things from the Democratic Party machine all over the country, where state parties do the bidding of either their governors or their national leaders. And then those same governors like Cuomo pretend, I didn't know anything about the mailer. I didn't know anything about this. When the Democratic Party of New York doesn't shit without Andrew Cuomo's permission. They don't sneeze without Governor Cuomo's permission. It is as likely on that level that Andrew Cuomo wouldn't know about a mailer going out to basically smear Cynthia Nixon. And by the way, Cynthia Nixon, who identifies as queer, she's married to a woman, she has 3 children, they practice Judaism. They take their kids to a synagogue. So it's absurd. Not only does she not even have an express position on BDS, but she's Jewish and practices Judaism. So what I found astounding about this, of course, Cuomo pretended he doesn't know anything about it. The media, by and large, the national media isn't doing a damn thing because they want Cuomo to win. Cuomo, to me, is kind of Hillary Clinton with a penis. I don't mean to be sexist, but she is the closest politician I could compare Cuomo to. Has a lot of progressive talk, a lot of progressive platitudes, and governs like a Republican. But the New York Times, who endorsed Governor Cuomo, claiming that, basically the endorsement was essentially like, yeah, he's corrupt. He has 2 officials that have been charged with criminal charges for corruption. He's done a lot of bad things, but, he's experienced, so we endorse him. So the New York Times, it doesn't happen all the time, but you do see media outlets revoke their endorsement if new information comes. We saw it with Todd Aiken, Mr. Legitimate Rape. We've seen it with other people who have their endorsements pulled. So everyone knows that Andrew Cuomo's Democratic Party of New York intentionally sent out this false mailer. And this is in New York, but this is a microcosm for the entire Democratic Party. As you remember, the Democratic National Committee was literally sending emails and pitches to media during the Democratic primary, trying to call Bernie Sanders an atheist, trying to get them to make Bernie Sanders seem like an atheist and that he's anti-Jewish, and all these ridiculous things. So the Democratic Party machine on a federal level as the DNC, or the state level, which was the New York Party, the Democratic Party of New York, is basically doing like Willie Horton, really slimy style, Roger Ailes style, Karl Rove style smears. And why are they doing that? Because they can't run on policy. They cannot run on policy. Andrew Cuomo, New York State has the largest income inequality of any state in the United States of America. New York State, number one, income inequality. New York State has some, probably compared, other than Chicago, I don't know a city that has more racial discrimination and racial policing than New York State. It is a police terrorist state in New York City. It got a little better after Andrew Cuomo, but it's not after Andrew Cuomo, after Bill de Blasio came in and they stopped stop and frisk and other things, but it's nowhere where it should be. But I want to read the New York Times article because I couldn't believe this. After it becomes very clear that Cuomo basically unleashed the Democratic Party to smear her in a cheap trick to get Jewish voters not to vote for her, this is what the New York Times says. Andrew Cuomo owes Cynthia Nixon an apology. A last-minute mailer from Democrats wrongly describing Miss Nixon as anti-Semitic is a disgrace by the editorial board of the New York Times. So in their original endorsement, they basically said Cuomo's attached to a lot of corruption. He's got a lot of issues. We don't think he's perfect, but he's experienced. So the New York Times likes experienced corruption, not inexperienced corruption. And now the New York Times editorial board, which are the creme de la creme on the editorial board, these are writers and their publisher and all that, basically in response to Andrew Cuomo and the Democratic Party lying and smearing who would be the first woman governor of New York, the first queer governor of New York, a progressive, and a Jewish person. Instead of pulling their endorsement, I mean, whatever, if the New York Times wanted to say, we're pulling our endorsement, we're not going to endorse Miss Nixon, but we're pulling our endorsement from Governor Cuomo. I would be okay with that. You can't force them to endorse a candidate, but basically their response, well, he should apologize. He had a minor error. Quote from the New York Times, this is dirty politics, nearly as sleazy as it gets. Days before voting Thursday in Governor Andrew Cuomo's primary race for re-election, the New York State Democratic Committee has sent voters a campaign mailer falsely accusing his challenger, Cynthia Nixon, of being silent on the rise of anti-Semitism. It says she supports the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement against Israel over its treatment of Palestinians. She does not. It accuses Ms. Nixon of opposing tax-supported funding of yeshivas, the private religious schools attended by many of New York City's Orthodox Jews. She has never said that. Quote, with anti-Semitism and bigotry on the rise, we can't take a chance, the mailer reads. Re-elect Governor Andrew Cuomo. This is the lowest form of politics and the most dangerous, exploiting the festering wounds and fears along ethnic and religious lines. You know kind of what it's similar to, Ty? You know what it's kind of similar to? What? President Trump saying Mexicans are the problem. So the Democratic Party is sending out this mailer, basically trying to make it seem that Cynthia Nixon is anti-Semitic, against funding Jewish private schools, which he's never even talked about.
Who did you send out the letter to? Was it DCCC? Just a DNC?
The New York State Democratic Party sent out mailers to voters. ahead of the election.
Did you get it?
I haven't checked my mail in a while. But, so basically the Democratic Party, I mean, it's not the same exact thing as Trump, but they're trying to prey on people's fears based on religion, ethnic lines. It's shameful. Yet the New York Times still endorses Governor Cuomo. According to them, sorry, Mr. Cuomo, but that strains credulity. Mr. Cuomo dominates the state Democratic Party. It acts ethically or abominably at his direction, or at the very least with his campaign's blessing. The committee, no doubt, sent this garbage in the cynical hope that it would prove effective with ultra-Orthodox Jews, who generally vote as a bloc, making them a sought-after constituency for New York politicians. Jeff Berman, executive director of the state Democratic Party and organization, said Saturday on Twitter that the mailer was, quote, a mistake and is inappropriate and is not the tone the Democratic Party should set. Yeah, it's a mistake when you get caught. Saying it wouldn't happen again. Sunday, he went further, saying the group would, quote, work with the Nixon campaign to send out a mailing of their choosing to the same universe of people. Even if that were possible so late in the campaign, it's not enough. Mr. Cuomo has an obligation to personally apologize and condemn these outrageous attacks. Voters deserve to hear Mr. Cuomo describe Ms. Nixon as a worthy opponent who abhors anti-Semitism. He should make sure that message gets to ultra-Orthodox voters ahead of Thursday's elections. And he should fire the party official who came up with the idea for the flyer. Give me a break. I'm going to fast forward here. But nonetheless, they say, given all the ethical lapses in Mr. Cuomo's administration, of which he has also pleaded ignorance, this smear is appalling. It is the kind of cynical behavior that detracts from Mr. Cuomo's often impressive ability to govern. I'm shocked that the New York Times thinks that it's very impressive governing when you give tax cuts to corporations, your donors, have corrupt officials that are doing your bidding, give giant handouts to real estate developers who donate to your campaigns at the expense of actual working people and black people who then get pushed out of the city. Impressive governing, that is. If he is not careful, it could make voters think they have no choice but to vote for someone else. Well, they do have a choice to vote for someone else, and part of voting or not voting for someone is based on their moral character. Even with all this, the New York Times concludes, Mr. Cuomo deserves the third time because of his potential to lead. His potential. Well, this is your third term, so I don't think we're really looking at his potential. Has he led or has he not led? Maybe the first term we're looking at somebody's potential. He should stop squandering that potential now. To be sure of it, New York Democrats need to turn out in large numbers on Thursday to support every reform-driven candidate possible. For the legislature, for attorney general, even for party committees. They can teach Albany a lesson it won't soon forget. Well, with op-eds like this from the New York Times, let me tell you, Albany's really going to change. Corruption's really going to change. Let me tell you. So, why this is so telling? If Cynthia Nixon, or a progressive candidate, sent out a mailer describing Governor Andrew Cuomo as supporting the BDS movement or wanting to defund private schools for Orthodox Jewish people, or basically as supporting anything, you know what the New York Times would be doing? They'd be calling on her to drop out of the race right this minute. I can promise you, if Bernie Sanders ever sent out a mailer during the 2016 campaign claiming Hillary Clinton was, anti-Semitic, or she's done things that are anti-Semitic, or that she's anti-Arab, or that she's anti-Mexican, or whatever the hell it is, not only would the corporate media, state, local, and national, be calling on him to drop out of the race, then they'd be going after him. He should drop out of the Senate. He's totally shamed himself and he cannot lead. If the New York Times was a reputable news organization, the New York Times is leading the charge against President Trump's racist dog whistling and blaming other ethnicities. So how could you in one turn be the leader of the resistance when you're endorsing a candidate who's preying on ethnic and religious fears? You can't do both. You got to pick one or the other. It doesn't. If it's a Democrat who's sending out shameful dog whistle, if you want to call it that, and mailers to God knows how many voters today wrongly think Cynthia Nixon is anti-Semitic. Could that make the difference if it's a close race? And you're going to say we should still re-elect Andrew Cuomo. That's not a that's not an unbiased, neutral media organization. That is a media organization in the tank for the corrupt Democratic Party, or as Bernie Sanders' lead advisor Warren Gunnels likes to say, the neoliberal times. If the shoe fits, wear it.